All right. Come back. And of course, the decision by NASA to have weekly protests have had some economic effects to the development of the country, and of course the decision also by the NASA principal to withdraw his candidature from the October 26th race somehow has also brought a lot of political debate in the country. And tonight we want to discuss about the political situation in our country. Is it affecting economy, and what next for the country? Should this sort of political stalemate continue even as we head towards the general elections? Remember, IEBC still maintains that the elections will be held on the 26th of October. So far, that is what we are getting from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, commissioners led by the chairperson, that is Ofula Chebukati, and NASA maintaining that this will not happen and have called for weekly protests. And this has adversely affected the economy of our country. And tonight in the studio, we are privileged to have a KEPSA chairperson, that is Mr. Vimal Shah, who is he is the chairperson of Mkenya Daima, and he's seated on my near left.
Thank you.
Seated next to him is none other than Engineer Patrick Obath, and he is the trustee of KEPSA, that is Kenya Private Sector Alliance. And tonight we want to delve into the economic situation in our country when it comes to the political stalemate that we are currently experiencing as a nation. And Engineer Obath, first thing first, the impact of the weekly. Is there an impact when it comes to the economy, when it comes to also the weekly demonstrations by NASA?
I think the real person who is suffering from these weekly demonstrations are your people who are trading at street level, right? It's your people who got shops that are servicing me and you when we walk through, the person who operates a kiosk, the mama mboga who's working down there. So it's the real Kenyan who is actually suffering, and they rely on the day-to-day trade in order to feed their children, to do whatever it is they're doing. And every time there is a demonstration and people go and sort of riot on the streets and do that, these people disappear. And they're relying on very thin margins, and they need that daily volume of trade for them to be able to make any money. So if you look at the impact of that, let's not even talk about the economy, let's look at the impact on the families of those people. Because it means there's no food in the house, people are not going to school, they have no money for health, and so forth. That is the impact, and that is the sad part about it, right?
Okay.
The large industries will have a slowdown, and everything else will open up at another time.
I was actually coming to that point later on. What is your take, Vimal?
I think first and foremost, we've got to understand that any form of disruption to the peace and to the harmony is disruptive. It is affecting everyone across the board, whether it's small, medium, or whatever, or even households. Where do people go shopping? Where does the Mwananchi or even, let's say, Wanjiku go shopping, right? Where do you go and do things? Everybody's putting off everything to say, let's talk after elections. After elections as a narrative. Why? And which elections? Right now, it's like, when are the elections going to come? So the anxiety being caused by all this is not good.
Okay.
One is the physical disruption that Patrick talked about. But look at the psychological effect that it's having. Everybody can't plan. They want to buy a house. They say, no, after elections. They want to get married, probably it's after elections.
So everything is actually after the election.
Everything. So, and we're putting off, and we're postponing everything. Why are we postponing this? This has happened for a year now. And I think it is time now.
Okay.
We say enough is enough.
Okay. So the next question is, how much has the country lost during this period? Because recently, KEPSA released a report showing that in the month of May and June, businesses within the CBD lost at least 48,304 every day. That was in the month of May and June when the protests were currently being held by NASA. So how much are we losing right now as a country?
I think if you were to quantify it right now, what is being lost and what is being, what is going to be lost in the future, it could be massive, right? When you look at even first time you heard the reports that fuel consumption has gone down in Kenya. I mean, why does fuel consumption go down? Because there's less traveling, there's less of movement, there's a lot of anxiety. People just staying put to say, stay where you are, don't move. Now, that does affect us. We were on a 5.6 to 5.7% GDP growth rate. You can see the latest figures coming out as 5%, downgrading all the time. Now, What is the impact on, what is going to be the impact of continued demonstrations? It is actually to bring the GDP down. I think that's the objective. So that means that people have less salaries, less work, less everything. Now, we've heard that in Kisumu, they're going to be closed till 12 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Every day. Which means, does that mean half salaries? Who's going to pay the employees? Everything is being disrupted.
Okay.
That's not good for our economy.
What do you have to say about it as a trustee of KEPSA, owing to the fact that the report actually came from KEPSA?
It's a fact. There is a lot of losses that are being felt by the industry. But I think there's another factor that has to be put into place. The cost of insurance, right? That hasn't been factored into that. There's a lot of money that is being spent on insurance just because of all these riots that are happening. Right? And that is an additional cost that is not required in this economy. Right? So that figure that was there in May is probably exactly the same, maybe even higher now, because people are wary from what they've seen in the past, and so more people are closing down at the street level.
Okay.
So I think this is something we do not want in this country.
And just before I get to your sentiments, Vimal, let me just still ask Engineer Obath, owing to the fact that KEPSA has gave this out report early this year, saying that at least every day, 48,304 shillings are lost because of the protest. But which is the most affected industry? Because the tourism sector has come out to say there's low numbers when it comes to people booking the hotels.
Yeah, I think there's two factors you've got to look at here. One is like a periodic thing that is over several months, and there is one which is due to daily disruptions which are happening, right? So when you talk about the tourism industry, this is something that there's a season that happens, and you've lost that season, effectively. That's what's happened. We are very good with tourism up to the middle of August, and the elections really were not showing any impact at all on the tourism arrivals. But 1st of September, tourism has dropped off. And it drops off towards the end of September, but 1st of September it dropped off completely. And nobody would even come to the Mara, which is where they would normally come. So I think this is not going to be good for us, because we were seeing some very good figures of tourism this year for the first time. And they were not actually responding to the changes on the traditional things that we get. We haven't even had this year a travel advisory. So it shows that Kenya was in a very good place from that point of view. Right? But now that, these things are happening, we don't even need a travel advisory. People are just saying, let's wait and see. You cannot come to Kenya. Okay.
Vima, what do you have to say with the fact that you're also in the industry?
I think first and foremost, every industrialist, every businessman, everybody, every leader in this country, whether you call yourself an MP, senator, governor, or whatever, the primary job of everyone is to create more jobs. We need to enhance more job creation facilities. We need to create more and more employment for our people. Otherwise, how do you put food, on their tables? That's one that we're disrupting right now. Everything gets disrupted. Planning gets disrupted. New investment gets disrupted. For this year, a lot of people have put off even building a house, building new properties. All that investment is being put off. Now, when you put off, that money can go somewhere else. Now, when you hear all this consumption going down and disruption happening on the streets, the psychological effect makes people to say, hang on, do I really want to invest right now or not? Let me start saving.
Okay.
Look at the banks. People have borrowed money from banks. They're unable to repay the loans. And you can see what's happening. Auctioneers are going and auctioning them. Why? Because of disruption. Okay,
so what are you people actually doing to address this issue, especially apart from now just calling on the two main players, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition leader Raila Odinga, to put the interests of the country first and come on the dialogue table and sort out this stalemate once and for all. Apart from that, what are you doing to address this issue? Especially when it comes to the security within the industry level, security within your workplace, just to ensure that this stalemate does not affect our country's economy?
I think when you look at it from three angles, right? We have already created all the institutions required in this country. We have a fantastic constitution, and we are democratic, and some people don't like democracy, but we are a democracy. We've got to accept that. And really, there's a mandate being given. There's an independent judiciary, and the mandate has been given. They have to do their job. In fact, they're doing their job very effectively. That's our dispute resolution mechanism. And you can see effectively they're giving judgments very, very fast. That should be used. Second, we have an IEBC there. The IEBC is supposed to handle independently the elections. And that's their process. They don't go voting. They actually just make sure that the ballots are cast, the ballots are put there, and that some people, you've got all the ballot papers available. They make sure that all happens. Then you've got the executive, and then you've got the MPs and all that stuff. When you look at all our systems, we have everything ready. The point is, why are we disrupting this right now?
Okay. Engineer Obath, what are you doing as an industry, you know, as a sector, KEPSA, Mkenya Daima, just to ensure that this issue is addressed once and for all?
I think there's two key things. One, we had for a long time, and we will continue to talk about, let's have peaceful elections, right? We've had that story, and we've always talked about it for the last 5, 6, 7 years. But the other thing that and I think Vimal has touched on it, is about the institutions we've got, which are actually been put into place to ensure that elections can take place. But I think the third thing is that our politicians have to behave. They've got to be responsible, right? There's an electoral process that has been put through a constitutional review, and everything else is now there. We've got all these, the IEBC, we've got the judiciary, we've got the police, we've got everybody ready for that. But if we get the kind of rhetoric we're seeing, the kind of behavior we're seeing from the political class in this country, who are trying to rubbish these institutions, then we cannot have good elections. Those institutions have to be protected, and ours as a business community is to say we have to protect those institutions. They have to be, and they have to grow, right? They can make mistakes, but rather than sort of rubbish them, we've got to go and say, how can we help you to improve?
Okay.
And
but
improve the fact that we can trust them without any fear.
Okay. Is it that the political players are not listening to the voice of the business community? Because before the elections, you had the same call, let's have a peaceful election, Kenyans go back to work. During the elections and even after, is it that the political players are not listening to the voice of the business community?
It's not just the business community. Every single caucus in this country is saying the same thing, right? And I think that is, we need to reiterate that message, that the whole of Kenya is saying the same thing. And I think the political class has to listen to the electorate.
Okay, Vimal, what do you have to say?
I think if you look at it, when we said Mkenya Daima, ni wajibu wetu, what does it mean? Our responsibility. As citizens, as a person in this country who is a leader, you're a leader. Everybody has a leader inside themselves. Let us arouse the leader inside yourself and say, what is credible, what is not credible is not credible. Yes, if there's a dispute. Yes, if there's a problem, let's go tackle it. There's a solution. Go to court, sort it out, right? We've seen the courts, right? Fine. One side ridiculed them. The other side says, fantastic, because they got a judgment against them or for them. My point is, win or lose. In an election, you are going to have a winner and a loser. That's what an election is. However, we cannot go around and say, oh, only I win, therefore you are wrong, and if I don't win, then you're wrong. I think it's got to be very clear. Fight it out, and we didn't say anything till now. But I think now when we're saying there's an election on 26th, get it done and over with, what we want as Kenyans, I think, is finish this electioning period, and let's go and get on with life.
Are you probably planning to have a dialogue with both candidates, probably separately or together?
That has happened. The dialogue.
Okay, right now that all this, that the stalemate is becoming too much, are you planning to have a dialogue with both candidates?
We continue to have dialogue. It's not as though we're going to start. We've been having dialogue all the way through. And I think the only difference is, as a business community, we don't announce it, but we do it.
You do it at the back?
We do it at the back.
Okay.
Because really, ours is to try and build consensus, talk at the back, understand, listen to the issues, and try and bring some consensus.
Okay, let's talk
we don't go around to the press and say, let's talk to people through the press or through the media.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about revenue collection. How's it been? Because shops are closed when demonstrations are happening, when there is insecurity, when you feel like our peace has been affected, it affects the revenue.
Naturally. When overall revenue goes down, the VAT goes down, the taxes go down, everything goes down. When employment decreases, what happens? You have less taxes. And I think that's where we're heading to if we're not careful. This is why it was all okay till Till yesterday we thought, okay, 26, the elections will be over, we're okay, we'll get it done, over and done with. Now we see it may be postponed for whatever reasons. And I think this is where I think enough is enough in terms of disruption. Let us all be responsible. And yes, even if you want to lead this country, you want to be president or whatever, you want to be there, you will need a credible country. And we all need to make it more prosperous. Otherwise, why would you want to be a leader? I think this is important. Number two, citizens of Kenya need to stand up and say, let's not have disruption on the streets. Let's not have disruption of property, right? You want to demonstrate, it's a right, it's a constitutional right. Demonstrate, but do it peacefully. You can do it without violence. What we see right now and what we've seen today onwards is not proper.
Okay.
Now, at the same time, there's a mandate given by the people of Kenya. The people of Kenya have given a mandate to the police force. Do what you have to do, right? Now, the question is, if they're going to go in there, because it's actually an understaffed, our police is understaffed, under-equipped, all that stuff. When you look at it, they have to go and maintain the peace. If there's a robbery happening in your house, whom do you call? You
call the police officer.
Right.
Okay. Obath, what do you have to say?
I think on revenue, let's look at the bigger picture. A lot of the manifestos of the political parties are talking about we need to create jobs. And I think everybody realizes that there's a youth bulge in the country that needs to be taken care of. We need to create jobs. But we are now talking of a GDP that is 5.5, 5.6, 6, right, and 5 today. We are not going to create jobs until the GDP is in the figure of 10 plus. That's where we've got to go to. And if we are going to continue having this kind of circus every 5 years, we are going to destroy whatever we build between one election and the next. And we're going to be seeing 5% GDP growth.
So
the last time we saw good GDP growth was prior to 2007. And we got to a point where we started off in 2002 at a GDP which was almost zero. In fact, it was negative. And by 2007, our GDP was hitting 8. Now, if that trajectory had continued, the issue of talking about job creation on the manifesto would not be there. We would be creating jobs as a private sector.
So are you trying to say, Engineer Obath, that should the GDP remain at 5, then it means several Kenyans will remain unemployed?
It is a reality. We need to start growing the economy. That is how you create jobs. And the GDP is a measure of the growth of the economy, of the size of the economy.
So with the political situation in the country right now, so many Kenyans will remain unemployed, especially the youth?
Can I say one more thing here? Like Patrick said, have you seen the manifestos of all the parties? If you see the manifestos, they're all pro-growth. They're all saying, let's have progress, let's create more jobs, and let's create more employment. However, when you look at all the arguments that are being fought in the political field, it's not about how am I going to increase the GDP, how am I going to increase jobs, or how we're going to make flour to become, unga to become 50 shillings or 60 shillings. It's still about the other guy is not good, I'm good, that sort of thing. That rhetoric we need to change. I think let's be responsible. Let's have transparency, let's have accountability. Whoever wins, doesn't matter. The point is, let's make sure we don't destroy our economy, because our economy is in a good place. Now let me give you the good news. Kenya is still in a good books right now as far as the global scene for Africa is concerned, because all the rest have gone down slightly. And therefore Kenya still is looking good. It can deteriorate very fast if we're not careful. And this is why we're saying right now, everybody needs to come out and say, we don't want to have this disruption. Let's go out and say, fine, let's talk it over. Whether it's dialogue, whether it's dispute resolution mechanism, whether it's the courts, whichever process is used, resolve all disputes and be issue-based. We're not issue-based today, we're still personality-based. It's about this guy or that guy. Let's make it issue-based and say, fine, 1, 2, 3 is not proper, let's get a court judgment, let's get it out.
Okay. And as KEPSA, what are you doing exactly? Because KEPSA also is part of Mkenya Daima. What are you doing exactly to ensure that the economy is stable?
It's our engagements that we're doing at the moment is what we use to ensure that the economy does not deteriorate further, right? We've got to reassure, and we do that with everybody who's coming potentially to invest in Kenya. We know ourselves that the country is a resilient country. So our discussion with people who are potentially coming to invest, people who want to put money into Kenya, we're telling them this is a good country. We have this, every 5 years we have this blip that happens in the country. We need to sort that out as Kenyans and make sure elections are done in a way that does not send out the wrong message. But underlying all that, what you're telling our investors and people we're talking about from outside, this is a good place to invest, right? And that message is continuous. We still have people who are investing. People who have started investing are continuing. We've got those who have sort of delayed the investment. They're probably going to come in next year or maybe the year after, because their window of opportunity may have gone for them to invest. But our message is very clear that this is a good investment destination. Given, despite all this stuff we're seeing, the underlying trend in Kenya is up.
Which takes me back to your statement, which takes me back to the question I'd asked earlier. Which is the most affected industry? Is it the real estate? Is it the manufacturing industry? Is it the tourism industry? Because all sectors are affected.
I think it goes across the board. Real estate has gotten affected because that's a longer term effect. Because construction this year is very, very much gone down. Reason is people put off investments in any real estate for the whole year. But right now it's like you don't want to do that. If you want to buy a house, you don't say fine after elections. You want to buy something, you're going to put it off. And that's why the whole market has a slump. The credit crunch right now, which we've got in this country, is not also helping. You know, with the banks' interest rates being curbed and all that stuff, they're not lending to risky businesses because the rate is lower. At the same time, I think when we look at overall the economy, we are in a good place at one place, but also in a bad place if we don't own up, if we don't act responsible. What we do, and we actually have dialogue with everybody. We want to make sure that the processes are okay. So we've had dialogue with IEBC also. We've had dialogue with the judiciary and really talk to them and say, find out. They have their processes all there. They need to make sure the processes are credible. And they have a job to do without fear or favor, without intimidation also. Same thing, judiciary has to do it without intimidation. So that's something that's important, and the mandate has been given by people. What we ensure is to say, we understand the processes are clear, and they've got to do their job properly. And really, it's one of those fights. Every election you have this issue, but I think we've got to get rid of this whole problem that elections means disruption, elections means a problem. We'd rather have an electronic voting whereby you're on your mobile phone
you just vote
and you can just vote and you're working here and you've passed your vote and you're done and you're all qualified.
Okay.
What is M-Pesa? You got M-Pesa, right? If you got M-Pesa, you don't make mistakes there. Same way you could actually have elections on record and the country continues. No disruption of anything. Okay.
And Engineer Obath, earlier on you had said that Kenya has, the trend has always been the same after every 5 years when you go for elections. Has this year been worse than the previous years when you compare it to our economy, when you compare it to 2013, 2007, 2002?
I think the drop this year has been less. Yes. Up to the time the elections happened and everything else, with the figures we have, the delta, the change in the GDP during the election year, this year has been the best, right? So we're getting better. But I think this circus we're having now, right, may have, may make it a little bit worse. But I don't think it's going to be worse than the previous years. That drop is not going to be that bad. Okay. Because I think Kenyans are now getting a lot more resilient to this kind of stuff, and we're going to take off fairly quickly.
Okay. Now, and as we come to a close of this discussion, probably I may ask, and I may start with Vimal, what is your message to both President Uhuru Kenyatta and NASA flag bearer Raila Odinga, and also Kenyans at large, and especially the young people who turn up for these demonstrations, because the numbers are large? It clearly shows the rate of unemployment in the country.
I think first and foremost my message to both of them would be, we're all brothers. We're all the same. We're all Kenyans, number one. Number two, we're all brothers born in the same land. This is just another fight. Fight it properly, fight it clearly, and let's get a result. At the end of the day, it's all about the people's vote, because the power is not with the presidents. The power is not with the governors. The power is with the person out there who has got the vote. And this is where we're saying to right now. Whichever choice you make it. Let's make it happen, and let's make sure it's credible, it's peaceful. This peace that we have in this country must not be disrupted. Whichever fight you want to have, and I think very important for us to say is, the politicians will play their politics. Let that be separate and let the business continue. Let people get employed. Let people go to work, come back from work and say, fine. The politicians will always keep on doing their job. So let's insulate politics from...
But when you say let's separate politics from business...
No, I said insulate.
Okay. How possible is it?
It's very much possible. You can have your fights in the courts, you can have your fights and arguments of legal, because lawyers are fighting all over. Let them handle it, because any dispute, you have to resolve it by that method. Any other dispute, you do not go and say, let me now start hitting people, or I resort to violence, or I resort to demonstrations. I think this is important. Number two, we already have governors in place, sworn in. They've not rejected the elections. We already have senators, we already have MPs, we already have MCAs and women's reps. All those are done. Let them get on with work. Rather than wait for an election, why don't they get on with work? And everybody else make sure. It is the duty of every governor in every county to make sure there is peace in their counties. And that's important for them.
And just, I'll get to that question later on. Obath, your message to...
My message is two-pronged. The first one is that we recognize the right of people to go to the street. But they have to do that responsibly. Not to go and destroy properties, businesses, and so forth. A lot of places in the world, people will walk. They will say, I'm going to have a protest, I'm going to have a demonstration from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Then what happens is the police will come and insulate them from other people coming in to attack them. But the people who are insulated are not carrying rocks, they're not carrying anything, they're carrying placards with a message. And they walk, they go and give their message, and then they go back. But it is a timed thing, you know when it's going to happen and when it's going to finish. And it is within a controlled area. We need to get that responsible so that we recognize that we have our right to do what we have to do, but we do not want to then affect everybody else. So I think that is a strong message I'd like to give out. The second one is we really need to get to a place like Germany. If you remember almost 2 weeks ago, they had an election, but they were also running the Berlin Marathon in the same place. So, and nobody noticed the difference. And it happened peacefully. And I could go, do my marathon, and then I go and vote. And both results were coming out without any issue. We need to get this country to a place whereby we have exactly the same thing. An election can be going on, and business is working, and nobody notices the difference. That really is what our leadership in this country must strive to get us to. And the way they conduct themselves when we are going through an electioneering period should allow us to get to that kind of situation.
You'd mentioned about having elected leaders. You mentioned several seats, the governors, the women rep, and the senators, MCs and the MPs. But at the same time, remember that you're telling them to continue working, but they're the same people who are involved in these demonstrations, thus affecting the economy.
But they've already got positions, they've already got a job to do.
Because look at what happened in Kisumu County.
I think there's a governor there already. It's his duty to make sure things happen. I think the business community met with the governor yesterday and discussed this out to say, fine, what do we do about it? I think they've got to come with amicable solutions to say no disruption to peace. I think it is the governor's duty to make sure in their own counties they should be responsible. In fact, they should be held responsible for peace or for non-peace.
Now let's talk about Mkenya Daima. Oh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, let's just, just to take Vimal's point. Have we heard of issues in Mombasa? And yet they're demonstrating. Yeah? That is the way to do it. And that's all I wanted to say. I mean, there is a way of doing it that is very good.
In a peaceful way.
And that is it. I mean, the Mombasa hasn't hit the headlines. They hit the headlines the first day because they actually happened. We haven't had those things in Mombasa. But since then, it's not news anymore because it's happening very well. Yeah.
Now let's talk about Mkenya Daima, because both of you involved, you're strongly involved in Mkenya Daima. During this time that our country is in a political stalemate, what is Mkenya Daima exactly going to do?
I think first and foremost, like I said earlier, we have dialogue with everyone, all the institutions, including the IEBC, judiciary, the police, all the independents, and discuss with the parties also, and have that dialogue to say we're going to have a credible election. Transparency, accountability, and really, it's about our responsibility. And therefore, let's make sure that it's peaceful. It's done in a manner where it's conducive to everybody, nothing is really hurt. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I think it's important to say, let's call a spade, because you should be able to look people in the eye and say, fine, that's not on, this is on. It's not about being psychopaths. We brought the business community, the religious organizations together, and part of civil society coming together and saying, let's all be together. We've also brought the university student leaders. And I can tell you one thing, university student leaders from a lot of our universities are very credible. Our youth are very credible, provided they have the right leadership.
Okay.
And when we got them together with all of the student leaders and the university students, they are now icons of peace to say, we will not be used.
Okay. And being a trustee of KEPSA, Mkenya Daima, are you likely to carry out peaceful campaigns?
Our campaigns are peaceful. You know, you don't hear us going to
okay, not peaceful campaigns in terms of going to the streets carrying placards.
Right, yeah. Ours is exactly that. I think the strength that we have as KEPSA, as Mkenya Daima, is that for all this time, right through from 2007 up to now, we have been viewed as a non-partisan organization. Because by the time you get to KEPSA, you have removed all the likelihood that you're seen as partisan. When I start with Vimal and his business and Patrick Obath and his business, as an individual, I'll be seen to be partisan. I am. I vote for a political party, right? So as an individual, I am partisan. I exercise my right to vote. But when you begin to go up and you agglomerate people together, then the issue of being partisan begins to disappear. And I think that is the strength that we have as an organization, in terms of saying we are non-partisan, ours is purely working for this country.
Okay.
And that is our contribution towards ensuring that we have fair, free and credible elections in the country.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was nice having you on a set. I've been talking to Vimal Shah, chairperson of Mkenya Daima, and engineer Patrick Obath, who's trustee of KEPSA, that is Kenya Private Sector Alliance, where we're discussing about the effects of the political stalemate that the country is currently experiencing right now. And we'd just like to reiterate that as Kenyans, it is upon us to maintain peace during this time and ensure that peace, love and unity is what we have every single day as you wake up and as you go back home. Time for a short commercial break, but we shall be right back with more news.